Welcome back to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schuknecht, and today's guest is Anne Dranitsaris, author of Not Broken, Just Delayed. Anne, did I get your last name right?
You absolutely
Okay.
did. Kudos.
Practiced it before you hit record, and I still am like, did I do it? It's funny because I literally have this problem every time I do a recording for a podcast because my last name is not easy to say, and whenever I mess up somebody else's name, I feel terrible. But I got yours, so we're good. All right. Well, Anne, let's start out with having you tell us about your book. So, Not Broken, Just Delayed, The 100-Year Evolution of Codependency and Why We're Still Stuck. Tell me about why you wrote this.
Well, I didn't start off writing this, Kelly. I actually started off writing a book on looking at codependency from a developmental perspective as opposed to, this thing that's always been associated with addiction and alcoholism and just basically not being able to do relationships very well, must be because I'm codependent. And when I was writing it, I became fascinated with not only the history of how psychotherapy and the helping professions approach codependency, but just the social context in which each decade presented for codependency to be understood or misunderstood, as it were. And unfortunately, somewhere in the 70s and 80s, when everything was starting to blossom in terms of, self-help and really being able to speak out about our childhood and our trauma, we started to adopt these names as though they were part of our identity. And I am codependent in terms of Alcoholics Anonymous. It just became something that we declared that we were, as opposed to, as I frame in my book through that developmental lens, we are stuck in the codependent stage of development because our childhood didn't provide us with what we needed for our authentic self to feel secure so that we could grow into our authentic self. Thus, 10 years later, I started this book I guess it's 8 years later, in 2017, I started the book, and I just came back to it this year. And I thought, no, I want to first put down the history of why this happened. And then from there, I'm going to follow up with the developmental stages and how codependency shows itself in different personality types.
Okay. I want to stop you there, and I want you to tell me about codependency because while you say the word, I'm still like, I don't know if I know exactly what that means. Can you back up and explain codependency to you? I see the Ph.D. after your name to non doctors, but just in layman's terms, like what does codependency mean?
Well, how I frame codependency as a stage of development is where we still haven't individuated enough psychologically. And I use that word very loosely because individuation simply means that we're able to function on our own, but we still recognize that we need other people. We can ask for help. We can take in help when we need it, and that we feel comfortable enough in our own self to say no when no is appropriate, and we feel entitled to ask for those things that we need. And so what I flag in the book is this difference when we're codependent is that we're always hiding behind this mask of, trying to be pleasing or putting our image forth so that people will like us and include us and we'll have a place to belong. And so the codependent part of it is that we're still dependent on the outer world to tell us that we're okay. And we
Okay.
look for others to make us feel safe and to validate us instead of saying, this is who I am self-validating. I still need what I need. and I still ask for it. Did you like the way I did that? Or am I on point here? And that we can take feedback without our sense of self disintegrating, as it were.
Okay. So what are some signs or like for you as you're talking with somebody, how do you determine that that person is codependent? Like or maybe I should say it in the other sense of like as a person, how do you help people identify the signs of being codependent, like to self identify that, not for you to tell them they are, but how can people recognize that?
Well, when we're making up reasons why we can't do what we want to do, and that we have to put other people ahead of ourselves, there's in our society and in Canada and in the States, I think this is very current that as a parent, we can't have our own evenings off because we have to ferry our kids around, and our kids' need for their activities are more important, and that it can't be a negotiation and we can't have both, that whatever our children needs takes priority over what we actually need as adults. And there's a lot of people who will put entire decades on hold. Know that I was raised by a mother who always bought her children clothes before she bought anything for herself, because it was her duty as a mother. It's part of our conditioning. At work, it comes out in not feeling like we're entitled to say to our manager, I'm sorry, I can't get to that today. I'll have to get to it tomorrow, for fear. And it's these underlying fears, you see, that are really telling that the underlying fear is, if I assert myself and say no, then I will be fired, rejected, not liked, punished, abandoned, all of those things that are a direct result of things that happened to us in our childhood. And our nervous system carries the story of our childhood.
There's things that I like identify with when you're talking, but things I don't also. So, because like I said, I don't really know much about codependency, but when you talk about in the workplace, I definitely like some of that resonates with me where I'm like, it's hard when I was working for somebody else. It was hard for me to say, like, no, I can't get that done. Like, you're asking me to do this at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. Like, no, I can't get that done by tomorrow morning, because I would be afraid I'd lose my job, right? Even though in reality, it's like I wasn't going to lose my job for that, but like I felt that in my nervous system, like, like
Oh, exactly. And it comes up, these automatic thoughts come up of the danger of self expression or self assertion. Because at some point in one's childhood, one was taught, and we're all taught, that authority resides outside of us. And our relationship with authority then gets carried forward. And if we're brought up in, say, for example, a patriarchal society, we automatically defer to the male. If if we had a very strong-minded mother who took care of every single physical need, we might have difficulty making decisions to do something different because we don't want to disappoint her. And so that authority over us continues long after we should have grown out of it. And this
yeah.
is it. It's a growth thing. I have a great example of this. My niece was just offered a job where she was able to, she would have had to have moved in order to take the job. And her mother had an absolute meltdown. She accused the daughter of everything from not loving her to abandoning her to not thinking about anybody but herself. And this young woman's 42 years old. So you see, just because we get older does not mean we develop emotionally. It's not uncommon that this happens. And we can all be in our little bubbles about, everyone's like us, but, this happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, you mentioned like alcoholism, substance abuse, things like that. So how do those, how, and honestly, like when I think of the word codependency, like those are the things that come up for like that I think of that I associate it with. So how do those play into this? Because the examples you're giving are not about anything like
No.
that. But how does that relate? The
Well,
substance abuse
because
part of it.
this was where it all started, and it was actually in the 1930s at the onset of alcoholism and drug addiction being identified as a disease. And it was also recognized that the family of addicts, they played a part in keeping up the image to the outside world, that they were fine, the family unit was fine, and it became the role of usually the wife, to make sure that image was bright and shiny. And that continued on until around the 1970s, and in the 70s it was like codependency got a name, a disorder of its own. It was named codependency, and it was recognized that anything in childhood that gets in the way of our actual development, if we have to adapt excessively, then there's an over reliance on the outer world to validate us and tell us that we're okay. Otherwise, we have increasing experiences of anxiety and depression, and fear and catastrophizing that something is going to happen. And so it wasn't until the 1970s where it actually started to separate from that medical model, from the addiction model, and it got a disorder name of its own. It wasn't actually in the DSM-4 or 5, whatever it was at the time, but it was recognized that you didn't have to have an alcoholic parent or be involved with an alcoholic in order to be codependent. It just all depended on childhood. And that was the first opportunity, actually, where we could have said, okay, this is delayed development. This isn't a mental issue. This isn't, we're not broken. We don't need to be fixed. We need to pick up our own development where it got left off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we struggle to do because, and I hear so many people say this, it's hard. We have
Yeah.
neural pathways in our brain that are set to
Yeah.
behave in these ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about who your book is for. Who is the ideal reader and who does this book help?
This book, there's a fairly wide spectrum of who the book is for. It can be for therapists, psychologists, anybody in the helping professions to help their clients who identify as codependent. For those people who just are looking for a book that will help them understand why they're stuck, why they know they're codependent, but they're having a really hard time because they don't want to identify as codependent for life. They don't want to do the 12-step programs. They've done some therapy, but it still hasn't moved them. They understand themselves and are very emotionally intelligent and self-aware, but the fear pattern in their nervous system that tells them to stay small and adapt still gets activated. And the last part of the book, that's the section on how to start your development, how to reboot your development because you got stuck at a certain stage, and you have to consistently over time repattern your brain so that you can stop the automatic behaviors and thinking that go along with the fear pattern that gets activated.
You know, the example you gave of the woman who had a breakdown because her daughter was moving makes me think, and then talking about the substance abuse side of it, it almost seems like easier when you're dealing with substance abuse issues, like it's very obvious that there's a problem, right? Like, but for somebody whose codependency comes out in the way that they're reacting to it within their relationships, how like how do they identify that, and how do they work through that? Because if it's a drinking problem, it's very easy to say I need to stop. I mean, it's not easy, but but I mean it's more more obvious, right? I need to stop drinking. I need to go to this program. I'm on this path to fix it, right? But like if it's relationships that you're focused, like your obsession or your addiction becomes your relationships with people. How do you fix that? Like, how do you start reworking the neural pathways in your brain? How do you work through that?
Well, and it's a great question. The first thing I always suggest to people is to stop thinking that there's something broken and they need to fix it.
Hence the title. Love it. Okay.
Hence the title. It's that our brain is wired to create relationship patterns in the way that we had a relationship with our primary caretaker, and extending out from there to all authority. And we can, and you hear this all the time. Oh, I thought this guy was going to be different, or I thought this, he seemed so different at the beginning, and then it all turned out the same. Instead of looking at, how did I contribute to that, and what do I need to do differently in order to not create the same relationship? Because one has to be willing to say, oh, I don't like the way this person's behaving. I'm going to stop this right now. But what codependents do is they think that they have the power to change the other person. Just as if I'm a good girl, mommy will love me. It sort of goes along with that idea of if I'm more pleasing to them, if I do more, if I become a better cook, or, I'm talking from the female side of it, but men do this as well. It's thinking that you have to do something to be loved, and not feeling entitled enough to say, this doesn't work, and if you keep behaving like this, I'm leaving. I'm not here to fix you. You're not broken either. You're just behaving this way, and it doesn't work for me. So many people they're either afraid of being alone, or they really believe that they're the issue, and if they just fix themselves and get the right behavior, then they'll be loved. And it's very sad, but it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about the title. Before we started recording, we talked about you had a title, you had one title, and then now you have the current title. So tell me about the process of what was the title originally and why did you change it?
So the original title was Rethinking Codependency for the Emotionally Intelligent. And who I was targeting when I was thinking about that title was those people who had done so much work on themselves, and they know, and they have so much information in their head, but they haven't changed their behavior in relationships. And so they're emotionally intelligent because they have that self-awareness. But I got some feedback that, well, maybe people won't know if this whole thing about emotional intelligence, and they might not have, looked into that. They might not know what the title means, or that even codependency needed rethinking. And so I thought on this for a while, and I thought about this whole notion about fixing ourselves, that we talk about it in that way. It's very current. It always has been, that what's wrong with me is the way we approach our psychological and emotional development, as though at one point in time we were fully mature and developed, and then we got broken. But we never were. Our development got delayed, and more energy went into developing this pleasing personality that was there to make everybody else happy than went into our own nourishment and taking care of ourselves and developing ourselves. And this can be split as well, Kelly, because we can, for example, in our career, we can, be very successful and rise to the top of organizations, or be an entrepreneur, write a book, and then we go into our personal lives and we go back into those same behaviors of codependency and caretaking and over nurturing and overthinking what everybody else needs.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was trying to look up your publication date. Oh, just.
Last
Well,
week.
I say that, but this episode won't come out for a little while. So, but anyways, at the
Yes,
time of this recording, your book just came out. So you changed the title before it published, not after.
yes,
Yeah.
before. Yeah,
Okay.
before.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And I so I want to ask a little bit just about you mentioned that you didn't set out to write this book, that it came about. It wasn't something that you were like, I want to write this book necessarily. Um, and then, kind of the what you went through with the title and kind of the way you're positioning the book really is from a marketing standpoint, like how you changed it because of that. Um, Tell me about the publishing process and your guidance in that the thought process of changing the title. Did you have some guidance through the publishing process as far as just with helping with publishing, with you talked about the guidance or the feedback you got on the title. Was that coming from a publisher? Tell me about that process for you.
So this isn't my first book. My first book came out in 2013, and it
Okay.
was through a publisher and an agent, and it's called Who You Meant to Be. Based on a quiz I had written for Oprah magazine.
Oh,
And because I had publicity around this from the article in the magazine, I had publishers and agents coming to me and wanting to sign me up. And I thought, okay, this is fantastic. And unfortunately, the publishing house that we went with at the time, it didn't get us the traction. We did the lion's share of the marketing ourselves. And so from that point, because I figured, and of course, the whole landscape of publishing was changing with Amazon, and you can now self publish. I decided that, the next book I wrote, I would write and self publish it. So I dropped my publisher at the time and my agent, wanting to do it alone, which is sort of my personality type, wanted to do it alone. And following that, my partner and who is also my daughter, Heather, we wrote a book called So You Think You Can Lead and self-published it on Amazon, and then Power Past the Imposter Syndrome as well. So the thing about my experience with the whole self-publishing is that if you don't have any marketing background, you're going to run into a whole lot of trouble. And unless you have a bit of an affinity for it, you need to hire the right people to do the marketing, because it's, as you likely know, really time consuming and doesn't always net you that which you want to achieve through the marketing process. And there's all kinds of, I probably get more emails from people because I self-publish on, they want to help me and they want to help me take my book to market, and here are 5 things that you can do. And that's a nice promise, but it doesn't always pan out.
sure.
We worked with one of those firms actually for a year with very little result from it.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you hired a marketing firm to do to help you with marketing the book?
yes, yeah. And to advise us, we also did surveys. What do people actually want? How do they want to, how do they want it packaged? This was more for Power Past the Imposter Syndrome, because everyone writes and thinks about the imposter syndrome. I don't
Yeah.
know, there's a whole lot of people that don't, but just couldn't get the traction with this firm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Very interesting. So, what would you advise people? I mean, the advice I heard was like maybe don't go the self-publishing route, or don't I don't know if you would advise people not to hire a book marketing firm, but I'm curious what advice do you have around that as far as finding somebody to help with marketing, if you've already self-published, what do you do at that point?
what's important is you find someone who can replicate your voice. And that's the most important thing. What I was told, and my process with this book, and as it is with the books that I write, is I always reach out to agents and publishers to see if they're interested. And so I probably have 35 on my list of both indie publishers and then the bigger houses to see, if they have any space. And what some of the publishing houses, what they're doing a bit of a hybrid now. They'll take you on, but you have to pay for and provide all of the marketing. And one person told me that unless I had, what was it, 10,000 followers and a mailing list, so big, no publishing house, no agent was going to take me on if I wasn't already, in just having that following.
Mhm.
So they're not doing the work that they used to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So I don't mean to discourage people.
yeah, no.
It's more about I'll continue self-publishing. I'll try in this, but my goal is just to make sure that my books are getting out, and that I love writing, and I love putting information out to people that will help them achieve their potential. And so whether they buy it this year or 10 years from now, it's that they buy it and that it's out there for people to purchase. And Amazon provides a wonderful platform for that.
Yeah. 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 I think, I'm an advocate of self-publishing. So I just tell people though, like it really just depends on what your goals are, right? So if your
Mm,
goal is to get the book out there and you don't want to wait for hearing back from traditional publishers, or you don't want to wait the timeline of it could take 2 or 3 years to get your book out if you go through a traditional publisher. So if your goal is really to have that book in hand and to get the message out there, self-publishing is great. If you want the credibility of a traditional publisher, then go that route. Like I
yeah.
will, you may not have that choice to go that route,
Yeah.
but pursue that route, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it really is dependent on the person. And you're right though, on the marketing side, it marketing is a lot of work. And I don't know that so I think it's great for people to go in with good reasonable expectations that I think sometimes people think they just are going to publish a book and you know, they're going to retire on it, right? And it's like, no, 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 that's not how it's going to work. So I think it's good for people to be prepared going in that it does take a lot of work to market your book. And for people that are looking to hire somebody to do the marketing, you need to have reasonable expectations for who you're hiring, what it's going to cost.
Yeah.
I've had authors come to me going like, well, can you market the book and just you just take a portion of the royalties? I'm like, no. That's not how this works.
No,
um,
I've come to think of publishing a book like starting a new business, because in essence it has to have its own web page and all of
yeah,
the social media and advertising and promoting. And when you think about any entrepreneurial business needs 3 years to actually get into the black in the books. And for a book to really find its place and find some footing out there, it's like, my friend read it and she told 10 friends. And then, I talked to people at this talk and and then all of a sudden it grows and it grows and it
yeah,
grows. But, if we, like an entrepreneurial business, if we think that we're just going to start and we're going to have clients knocking down the door without marketing or without adequate funding for it, you see, because we have to have enough money to pay someone to market it.
right.
Otherwise, all of our time goes into doing it. We have to be able to afford things like Canva and, all of these platforms out there that create the graphics that go along with the marketing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, it's just important for people to go in with reasonable expectations around those things.
yeah,
If your goal in life is just to get the book out there, great. Like you don't need to worry about some of that. But even then, I tell people like you have to invest in at least a professional cover editing,
Yeah.
and the interior layout of your book, because if you don't, it looks like crap. Like people aren't going to buy your book because it doesn't look good. So, or if they read it and there's errors all over it, because I
Yeah.
don't care how much time you spend rereading it, it's going to have errors in it. So you have to have a professional editor look at it. And those are the things I tell everyone. Like you have to be willing to invest in those three things at least.
Yes.
Then on the marketing side, yeah, it's a whole other thing. But if you have the time and energy to market your book yourself, great. But otherwise, it does cost money. And book marketers are not going to market your book for free on the chance that it's going to sell and they're going to get royalties. I know that the author mindset around that is like, well, if you're good at your job, you're gonna sell copies and you'll make money. And it's like, yeah, but I don't have any control of the actual content in your book. I don't, like there's a lot of other things going on there that no, like, that's not how it works. Anyways, that was my little soapbox there, Anne, on the working with authors and that side of it.
And what I also do is I send out an Acrobat copy of it to people to get their feedback.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
it lengthens the process because of course we're all anxious to get it to market. We just get it out there. But if we don't go through these steps and we don't think about, well, what will it need after it's launched and how will I still need to tend to this business to help it grow, then we're going to be really disappointed.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Anne. You shared so much about the publishing and marketing process, and I appreciate hearing your take on that. It's great. We always, everyone's experience is different in publishing,
Yes,
so it's great
absolutely.
to hear these different perspectives and experiences and learn from that. So, thank you for coming on and sharing your book with us. Oh, before I wrap up, though, I do want to ask, how can people, if people want to learn more about you, I'll link to your book in the show notes, but what other ways can people find out more about you?
So people can go to my website. It's AnneDranitsaris.com. My name will be in the show notes. And they can find me through that and my services and my book. I have a book page, and certainly on going to Amazon, you can find all of my books there.
Great. Well, we will share all those links, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing your book. And it seems like a great book for people who are experiencing codependency, whether it's themselves or someone that they love or someone that they're working with. So thank you so much for sharing your message.
And thank you so much for having me and all of your very intelligent questions, Kelly. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Anne.
Looking for a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyschuknecht.com.